First of all, apologies for taking a little bit long because of the logistical issues. We are now able to share some of the knowledge and the different experiences of the countries that we have brought today for this World Data Forum session. So on behalf of GPSDD and Cepei, I would like to welcome everyone to the session on covering opportunity in unusual places, how countries are helping each other to leverage administrative data for the SDGs. And this is a very important issue that we have discussed with GPSDD and Cepei as well. It's part of the partnership that we have, how different countries have addressed the importance of administrative data, but also what are the challenges and how they are actually taking some opportunities of using administrative records. Also connected to the new situation that we have with the COVID-19, how this is becoming also an opportunity or also a barrier to use admin data. We are very conscious that the SDGs require more data accessibility, but how easy is to access to new data sources and to close those data gaps that we have discussed for the past 5 years on the SDGs. That's actually some of the issues that we would like to address in today's session, but also checking on how new data sources connected to the admin data can improve the quality of those data sets, but also how we can include some protocols of data sharing so that we are able to access more data. But how? The how is actually the main concern that we have, and especially when we are discussing with the NSOs, how easy is to access to these new data sources in the case of admin data that has not been used for statistical purposes, but also the current data that some NSOs has access to is difficult to get granular data as well. So this is actually part of the learning experiences that we will see today from the 3 countries that are presenting in the next hour or so. The part of the capacity building that we would like to see as well in the discussion. Also, how we can broker partnerships among different NSOs, among other actors, civil society, academia, and different agencies as well, to look for opportunities as well in connection to the admin data. Also, I think this is relevant, and it will be also linked to my presentation in a moment, is how we can create a multi-stakeholder approach for admin data. Not only thinking about the NSOs and the ones that are connected to the statistical community, but also how we can engage with other actors that might have expertise on the thematics when we talk about health, education, but they don't have the expertise about statistics or data. So that's the process that we would like to see in the coming years as well, how we can advance in that kind of collaboration. And actually one of the things that we like to see as well is how we can turn plans into actions, how we can stop discussing about different things, but also take more actions in order to get more access to this new data that is actually not really new data. It's data that is not being used actually in some of the cases. So before I jump into my presentation about the motivations of some of the exercises that we have done in collaboration with GPSDD and Cepei, I would like you to check on the screen, and maybe Karen, if you can share, we would like to invite you to answer a question on a Slido question that we have. What is the first word that comes to your mind when you hear about admin records or admin data? We'd like to see from you and to read after the presentations from Viveki and myself, what are your thoughts? What comes to your mind when we discuss about admin data? So we have included in the chat the link. So please go to that link. In case that is difficult for you or you don't find a way to connect through that link, you can go to slido.com and use the code J385. I repeat it, J385, so that you can answer the question. And it's only one word that comes to your mind. So now I would like to move to a very short presentation that I will be doing today. Karin, please, can you allow me to share the screen? So in this short presentation, what I will be doing is presenting how we have been motivated to work on admin data. What kind of discussions have been done.
Hello, everyone. This is Vibeke, and I think we lost Freddie, who was speaking about administrative data. We had a joint presentation, so maybe Margarita, you could jump to my part of the presentation, and then Freddie can take over afterwards.
Sure.
So thank you, Margarita, and thank you everyone for joining this session, and apologies for the delays in getting started. I'm going to present a new collaborative that UN Statistics Division and the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data initiated back in May. And I'll try to summarize it briefly. If you have some follow-up questions or you would like to know more, we can also you can also contact me afterwards. Next slide, please. So we know that administrative data are a potential source for SDGs and for COVID-19, and we know that the needs for data are much more extensive now with both of these two strong data requests that are coming from the 2030 agenda, and also to better understand the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So that is why we also launched this collaborative to try and help and bring the statistics community together to address some of the challenges that we are facing and find good ways forward to increase the use of administrative data for statistical purposes. Of course, it's also challenging currently because administrative data have been affected to some extent by the pandemic as well. But we have also seen very good and positive increased use of administrative data in this context. Next slide, please. So the collaborative is trying to address both the urgent and the longer term needs to access and use administrative data for statistical purposes. And our main focus is to do that in a coherent and cross-cutting manner, building on advances made in various sectors and by different partners. It's a multi-stakeholder collaborative, which means that we have a lot of countries, and we also have regional and international agencies, including NGOs and different civil society. It's meant as a platform for collaboration and sharing of knowledge and experiences, and we're focusing on simple and ready to implement solutions that address priority gaps. Mainly focusing on trying not to duplicate work that has already been done, but rather build on it. Currently, we mainly have the national statistical offices from countries, but we do encourage them to also involve administrative data owners so that it will become a collaborative in the countries as well. Next slide, please. So, you know that there are, or many of you know that there are a lot of initiatives on the use of administrative data for statistical purposes that follow a sectoral approach. For instance, on civil registration and vital statistics, on business registers, etc. So we will also, and are also following that to some extent, but we are also trying to more strongly focus on the cross-cutting elements like data quality, like how to access the data or how to process them in a good way following metadata standards across. And we also try then to bring in the experiences that have been made through the different sectoral approaches and share knowledges across. And then the third angle of the approach of our work is also to focus on system development level, to really showcase which materials can be relevant for different stages of use of administrative data. So some countries already are quite advanced, others are just in the starting phase. So we are trying to make data information available for different stages. Next slide, please. So at the beginning of the collaborative, we also decided to create an inventory of resources. And this is very much linked to what I said earlier, that we really want to build on what is already there. So we asked all the members of the collaborative to share with us resources that they were aware of. And we received quite a lot of manuals and handbooks and more theoretically focused materials. But we know at the same time that there is a lot of additional materials out there, and a lot of it is maybe just experiences that different agencies and persons have gained through their own work. So we're currently in the process where we also try to add more practical resources, case studies from countries, e-learning materials, exercises, etc. So we hope to bring up this inventory in the next months and also have a lot of these more practical level experiences that we know many countries can benefit from. Although the situation is different from country to country, there's often a learning to some extent that can be applied in other countries as well. Next slide. Next slide, please. So as part of the collaborative, we've also started or established 3 task teams that focus more specifically on some of the topics. One is on institutional framework, coordination and partnerships, where we look at how to actually access the administrative data, how to build trust between statistics offices and the administrative data owners, how to build partnerships and collaborate. And we already have some good experiences that are coming out of it. We will be hearing from one of the countries that is co-leading this task team today, Kyrgyzstan. And the second task team is on data management and standardization. Important aspects here are understanding better the quality of the administrative data, supporting administrative data owners and also within the NSOs to discuss more what standards are there, definitions, metadata, etc. And then we have a third task team that focuses more on the technical side of interoperability and linking of data. So as I've been saying, we really try to build on what is already there and at the same time also focus on the practical challenges that many countries are facing. And then based on this learning that we are currently still in, we hope to develop some useful solutions and tools that can also be helpful to others moving forward so that we can expand on the use of administrative data for statistical purposes. Next slide, please. So we've also set up a website. This is it. At the moment, it's still quite general, but you will be able to find a lot more materials here in the months that are coming. And we really hope that this inventory, once it's up and running, will help in making a lot of materials that are out there more available to many of you. So it's easier to find and easier to also add more if you have good experiences yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vibeke, for that. I know we lost Freddie, so we'll just carry on with the webinar and then we'll come back to him once he's able to connect. I'll also just like to share my screen before we get into the meat of the webinar on the conversation from the countries. So we did a Slido poll and we asked, what's the first word that comes to your mind when you hear administrative data? And I think the keywords there's granularity, services, I think J385 was the code, but also government and business de datos. I think that's something to do with data for my little Spanish. But yeah, I think government is really standing out there, and I'd want to invite a few government representatives on this call to take us through their processes and their country experiences on administrative data. I'd like to start with Diego Andrade from INEC, Ecuador, who will be taking us through his experience on statistical harnessing of administrative data. Diego, you have 7 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good data, better lives. It is the slogan of INEC, the Ecuadorian Statistics Office, that works every day in order to provide the best information possible for the country. Hello, everyone. My name is Diego Andrade, INEC's Executive Director. It is a pleasure to be here sharing with all of you. In this opportunity, I'm going to talk about INEC's statistical harnessing of administrative data. INEC is the coordinator of the National Statistical System. This function is executed through identification and organization of the National Statistical System, short, medium, and long-term statistical planning, evaluation, and statistical quality through the Quality Assurance Framework. The Institute updates its inventories of information sources every year, identifying and characterizing statistical operations generated by the National Statistical System. By 2020, 75 records with a statistical potential and 75 record-based statistics were identified, used for information for decision-making. The use of administrative records is a priority for the Institute. Therefore, processes of diagnosis, strengthening, and integration of these sources are carried out. This experience has allowed the Institute to provide technical assistance to national statistical systems entities to strengthen their statistical production processes, seeking to provide timely and disaggregated information at lower costs. In order to take advantage from administrative registers in statistical production, those must go through statistical processing, in which administrative units and variables are transformed into statistical units and variables. To carry out this process, it is necessary to apply the following 3 pillars: methodology, that is based on statistical theory, information technology, such as big data tools and others, and 3, legal framework or data protection to guarantee the confidentiality of the data. Once the administrative register is transformed in the statistical register, this data could be used to validate and recover the identity of the entities, to improve accuracy, to complete missing values, to improve completeness, to correct and impute data, to improve quality, and add new variables to be analyzed, such as generating new indicators and studies. The administrative registers generated by the different institutions are collected and stored in a secure environment with restricted access, where data and the respective metadata are handled. This environment is divided into 3 stages: data collection, processing, and analysis. INEC has established a protocol for the transformation of administrative records into statistical records, which contains following steps: profiling, data correction, standardization, accuracy, coherence, duplicate values analysis, integration, and pseudonymization. Once the data is processed, it is released to the other areas so they can continue with their analysis. The first example of harnessing administrative data I brought today is the Statistical Register of General Debts. In recent years, Ecuador has implemented improvements focused on quality issues and information opportunities. Through their institutional coordination between the Ministry of Public Health, the Civil Registry Office, and the Ecuadorian NSO, the following improvements can be made. First, the implementation of the Vital Statistical Electronic Register in 2016, the intentional search and classification of maternal deaths, further validation by epidemiological investigation for death causes, and cause of death harmonization for homicide and suicide cases. These improvements have allowed the following actions executed in the context of the pandemic. We advanced 3 months the publication of general deaths of the year 2019. We create and publish the historical dashboard of deaths from 1997 to 2019. We invite you to visit the website listed on the slide. Another example are the health metrics generated during the pandemic. A week before the sanitary emergency declaration in Ecuador, INEC created a general vulnerability index using information from administrative health records, vital statistics, hospital records, and demographic projections. We generated 2 sub-indices, vulnerability and hospital response index. They are normalized indices that goes from 0 to 100 with municipal representation. They were presented to the National Emergency Committee. The vulnerability index measures the propensity of the population to contract SARS-CoV-2 virus through variables such as overcrowding, use of soap and water to wash hands, self-medication, mortality and morbidity of people over 60 years of age with pre-existing diseases that may present complications in case of contracting the virus, also proportion of the population over 60 years of age and population density. In the case of the hospital response index, the response capacity of the municipal health system is estimated using variables such as number of doctors and nurses, number of ICU beds, number of imaging equipment, tomographs and X-rays, and the number of pharmacies and laboratories. The results of the General Vulnerability Index were published in a geographic information viewer for governmental internal use only, within the collaboration of the National Emergency Committee. These actions made possible to generate an early warning and the provision of material and medical equipment to the areas with the greatest susceptibility to the disease. Finally, as you can see in the map, in the early stages of the pandemic, it was possible to map infections by municipality, which allowed a visual correlation with the results of the index. In this sense, it could be predicted that the coastal provinces had greater vulnerability, which was corroborated by the high levels of contagion recorded from April to June. The impact on the pandemic on conventional data collection methods, such as surveys, motivated the Ecuadorian NSO to work on the generation of laboratory statistics from administrative records. The objective was to complement the official laboratory statistics obtained from the National Employment Survey. Administrative data allowed INEC to provide public policy designers two main indicators: number of job positions and the number of workers. The main sources of information to generate these statistics came from the Ecuadorian Institute of Social Security, the Civil Registration Office, records from the National Tax Office, and the INEX Business Directory. These indicators were generated with interinstitutional cooperation to identify and strengthen the administrative data. These indicators were also standardized and approved in the Laboratory Statistics Commission. The benefits of using laboratory indicators from administrative data are to provide systematic, updated, and permanent information for public policy design. They segregated the statistical data and studies with panel data, as you can see in the exposed images. The Institute makes available studies and research carried out based on administrative records, which are available on the institutional website for public use. INEC is part of the Administrative Data Collaborative Initiative carried out by the GPSDD and UNSD, and regionally managed by Cepei and other NSOs. The initiative objective is to address both urgent and long-term needs to access and use administrative data for statistical purposes, considering the importance of the use of administrative records. INEC participates in all of the 3 task teams within the initiative. It has been a great honor to talk with you today and share our experiences. I hope we can get together next time. Greetings from Quito, Ecuador. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Diego. Thank you for your timekeeping, and it has been really an honor listening to you and hearing the experiences from Latin America. We'd like now to move to Africa and hear from Ms. Tuli. Ms. Tuli Amutenya is with the Namibia Statistics Agencies, and she'll be talking about their country experiences on admin data in Namibia. Over to you, Tuli. You have 7 minutes also.
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Tuli Amutenya from Namibia Statistics Agency, and I'll be talking to you about the status of administrative data in Namibia and highlight some of the use cases during the pandemic. Next slide, please, Karen. Namibia, the NSA is a custodian of the national statistics, and it was established in 2011. It also acts as a national coordinator for statistics, national statistics, and as well for the spatial infrastructures in the country. Since the inception, at least 40 memorandum of understanding have been signed with local and private data provider, who provides some statistics that are used for the administrative purposes. In 2019, June 2019, NSA, together with these local data producers, launched a SDG Baseline report, which highlights gaps across the sectors and challenges in accessing the administrative data from all the sectors in the country. Another linked to this was the launch of the SDG portal, which is accessible, and the public is able to access these information that is available. Can go to the next slide, please. This is just what I explained now, that we have various data producers at both at academic and public sectors. One of the main administrative data used in the country is the civil registration and vital statistics, and as well the health data. Please go to the next slide. At the national level, the government of Namibia has launched an e-governance and interoperability solution project. And this project is aimed to drive the exchange and the use of information between the institutions, and also to develop regulations and laws that are affecting the data sharing. One of these documents or regulations that are put in place, it's the Namibian Interoperability Framework, the Electronic Transaction and Cybersecurity Bills. All these are in work in progress. And also the IT policy for the public service. Let's go to the next slide. In this time of the global pandemic, NSA has recognized the pressure to explore innovative solutions and to react swiftly to emergencies such as this pandemic. And this also includes unlocking of new data sources and forming new collaborations. NSA partnered with the Ministry of Health and Social Services to provide COVID-19 statistics, and it's also serving in various thematic national task force teams to address the spread of the pandemic. And at a global level, through the global collaboration program between the UNECA and the GPSDD, which is aimed to enhance data access and infrastructure in countries, NSA for the first time has partnered with a local network operator and an international organization called FlowMinder to provide insights into primary and secondary movements or mobility or as affected by the interventions put in place. And this also to help to identify routine mobility patterns and also hotspots of the different regional areas. Let's go to the next slide. And in addition to the mobility data analysis, NSA has also launched an information hub which incorporates statistics and administrative data from the Ministry of Health to provide data related to COVID-19 and critical statistics on social health and labor force indicators. And please go to the next slide. The statistics on the hub is disaggregated, or information and statistics rather, it's disaggregated and is linked to geographical locations. This just provides the users with more comprehensive understanding of what the data means for them and to be able to interpret the information without advanced data analytic skills. And there is various data on the hub. We find data that is linked to social aspects, for instance, comparing population to the density growth. There is also distributed at different levels of the country. Let's go to the next slide. And most importantly, I think what we have taken away from the experience so far, what we learned from the experience of COVID, is that the issue of the timely data is a challenge in the country And some of the lessons that we learned is the need to strengthen the administrative data by working more closely with the local producers in setting up data agreements, looking into data governance issues, and establishing data users protection policies. Another important discovery is the significant impact of collaboration work. As we mentioned earlier, that NSA has collaborated with international and local partners. We identify that it's important for national statistics to work closely with international and local partners to share resources, to enhance the skills in data analytics, especially to analyze new data, these new data sources, and to also work in shared projects to produce outputs in a timely manner. And with that, I have come to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Tuli. And actually where you stopped is where I'd like to pick the next presentation. I think you mentioned about the lessons from COVID on administrative data, and your last slide had something around statistical legislation or legislative frameworks. I'd like to now invite Omurbek Ibrahim from the National Statistical Committee of Kyrgyzstan to talk about this specific issue on statistical legislation and steps towards attaining access to administrative data. Omurbek, the floor is yours. You have 7 minutes. And I must say, Omurbek, we thank you for your patience. It's quite late where you are, but thank you for accepting to join us. Over to you, Omurbek.
Can you hear me?
You're a bit faint, though.
Just a second. Can you hear me? Can I start?
Yes, yes, please do.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your interest and thank you for joining our session. I'll be talking about the new statistical legislation and its relation to the use of administrative data. The project on modernization of the statistical legislation started 3 years ago in the National Statistical Office. The project was implemented under the support of the UNSD and the World Bank project. It took us 3 years to modernize our statistical law. And last year, the draft of the law went through the parliament and the president signed it and enacted. It has become effective since July 2020. So the new law of the Kyrgyz Republic on official statistics is in line with, first of all, the fundamental principles of official statistics and the UNEC generic law on official statistics for Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia. So it is in line with this generic law to the maximum extent possible. And of course, it is also in line with the requirements of the national legislation. So the new law is offering a completely new legal framework, not only for the National Statistical Office, but for the entire national statistical system. And it's supposed to regulate the organizational functioning of the national statistical system and the establishment of the legal framework for development, production, and dissemination of official statistics. So the old law on state statistics was mainly on the National Statistical Office. And the new law of the Kyrgyz Republic on official statistics is going beyond the National Statistical Office and is now covering the principles of official statistics, the national statistical system. It also mentions the other producers of official statistics, the Statistical Council, which is responsible for specifying the strategic directions for the development of official statistics, and the coordination of the NSS and the statistical programs. And the law also mentions the specific role of the National Statistical Office in terms of coordinating the entire national statistical system. And of course, the law has some specific provisions also on the issue of access to the administrative data for statistical purposes. So my next slide is about specific provisions regarding the access to administrative data. In particular, the law mentions that national and local authorities are obliged to provide data and metadata they have at the level of details necessary for the production of official statistics. And if the owners of administrative data are going to make changes in the content of the administrative data, they should also discuss it in advance with the National Statistical Office. And one more thing, one more important issue that is highlighted in the law is that the National Statistical Office is also takes the responsibility for using the administrative data exclusively for statistical purposes. So this is a new provision in the law, and it gives a clear authority for the National Statistical Office and other producers of official statistics to get access to the administrative data. And now in this slide, I would like to talk about the opportunities and challenges and the way forward. So Kyrgyzstan, the National Statistical Office is lucky to have the to operate within the government, which is really pushing forward the programs on e-government and digitalization. And also the government has managed to set up the National Data Exchange platform, which is based on X-row technology. It should also be noted that the national unique IDs also exist for persons, dwellings, businesses in Kyrgyzstan for over 10 years. And as mentioned before, statistical legal framework. But of course, there are also some challenges. First of all, it is a lack of common metadata system, and one of the challenges is that the staff members of the National Statistical Office have some low capacity in using and accessing the quality of administrative data. As for the way forward, now we have the new law, and the next step would be to come up with, is to implement the new law and come up with some other regulations and bylaws, and also come up with some procedures and rules on how to exchange administrative data with key ministries and agencies. And this is to ensure security of administrative data once it gets full access to them. And should be work as the National Statistical Office should also be working on further building the capacity on use of administrative data. And in my next slide, I would also like to talk about the impact of COVID-19 in Kyrgyzstan, especially its impact on the production of official statistics. So the National Statistical Office was supposed to conduct the 2020 population and housing census in spring 2020, but unfortunately it has been postponed for an indefinite period of time. And the National Statistical Office is also having difficulties with collecting regular statistical business survey data because of the COVID-19 lockdown. And the management of the National Statistical Office sees the opportunity to also is looking for some solutions how to tackle these problems. And one of the solutions would be to build a new system for the so-called register-based population and housing census in partnership with relevant owners of administrative data. As I mentioned in my previous slides, so we have some specific administrative registers with specific IDs for persons, dwellings, and both these IDs of persons and dwellings could be linked, and it is creating a good framework for a new system for register-based population and housing census in Kyrgyzstan, maybe for the next round of the population and housing census. And the National Statistical Office is also discussing actively how the NSO could also use more use more data coming from the tax agency and other administrative data to combine with the statistical business surveys. And this is how the NSO could also reduce response burden on businesses. So this is my last slide. If you are interested in having a look at the law of the Kyrgyz Republic on official statistics, here is the link. Here's the link, so you can go to the website of the National Statistical Office and have a look at the law. I would like to thank you for your attention, and if you have some questions, I can answer them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omurbek, for that. And that marks the end of the country presentation. So I'd want to now pass the mic or the moderation back to you, Jenna, to run us through the next session. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, especially to our panelists. We have a number of great questions coming in through the chat. I'm very much looking forward to sharing these with the panelists and hearing their input. Before we start off with the Q&A, we have a question in Slido, which Karen has just shared on the screen, and she'll be putting that link into the chat. And the question is, please describe in one word a change that you would like to see in the use of administrative data. And so please take a moment to click on that link and go to the Slido while you listen to the Q&A and share with us, and then we'll share that toward the end. So we have a number of questions, as I said. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read out, because we had a number of questions directed to specific panelists. I'm going to share them out now, and then we'll go back to those individual panelists who have questions directed to them. So the first question from Albert Motivens at Equal Measures is to Vibeke, and he's asking about the resources that will be compiled by the Administrative Data Collaborative. What cross-cutting issues are most significant or strongest, and where will we focus? We had a question from UNSD to Tuli about the hub that she described, the data hub, and then she actually answered that in the chat. So if you're interested in the link and some information, that's already been addressed. We had another question to Tuli from Bill Anderson. He emphasized data quality, and he was wondering about the approach taken in Namibia, how to improve data quality, and how to ensure that administrative data are good enough for the production of statistics. And we had two questions for Omurbek, one from Nancy. Does your framework, your new legal framework, cover administrative data only from government or also from outside government, particularly private sector? Another question to you, I think from Albert, was for Kyrgyzstan, what other countries did you learn from in with respect to e-government? And how did leveraging e-government help you to leapfrog in the use of administrative data for statistical purposes? And then finally, we had another question, which I welcome input from Omurbek or anyone else. It was more of a general question. What countries have good frameworks for using, good legal frameworks for using administrative data for statistical purposes? So that's a lot of very good questions. We'll, in the order that I named you, so we'll first go to Vibeke, then Tuli, and then Omurbek. Over to you, Vibeke, to answer the first question.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for all the great questions, as you were saying. So on the resources that will be compiled on the inventory, I think we are still a little bit on kind of trying to get a proper understanding of what is really there. And for that, we really need everyone to contribute to it. So it's a little bit difficult to tell you now what will be there, but we will be trying to draw as much as possible from different thematic areas and different experiences across countries, from the more developed to the ones that are just starting to use administrative data for statistical purposes. But I think in one of the areas where we know that there has been a lot of activity and a lot of work already has been done is on civil registration and vital statistics. So I'm assuming that we will have quite a lot of materials from that. And then hopefully we will also find a lot of other materials, and where we don't find as much, that might be an opportunity for us together with the relevant partners also to develop something new to kind of fill those gaps. So I think those would be my response overall. On the good legal frameworks, my thinking is that a lot of the Nordic countries, or the kind of countries that are already using administrative data actively for statistical purposes, those also have good systems in place when it comes to the access and the collaboration. So that could potentially be something to look at. But then also the generic statistical law that UNECE has worked on, that Omerbek mentioned, is really a go-to document, I would say, for learning and seeing how to use, what legal framework could be a good one to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Vibeke. And before we go to Omerbek and Tuli and David, on behalf of Diego, we had one other question come in from all panelists. And so I'll read it out now so that you can all speak to it. And that is, how do your frameworks protect people's civil liberties from the misuse of statistics based on administrative data? So we'll go now to Tuli to answer Bill's question about data quality and this question about protecting civil liberties. Over to you, Tuli.
Thank you. Indeed, data quality is a big challenge, and it's the same thing with NSA. At the moment, what's in place is the data quality framework, the data quality framework, assessment framework, which is implemented and is gazetted at the national level. But there's still a lot of work to be done in ensuring that organizations that are within the data chain are adhering, or they are educated in these processes. One of the projects that we are busy with now is, as Frederick mentioned earlier, we joined the data administrative program. So for the data from end, we have representative in all the task force team, which is the interoperability and data exchange platform. There's one also on the data management, and this is in efforts to create some new methods, or to use the existing experience from countries and creating methods that work for Namibia. In Namibia, the civil registration, as I mentioned earlier, has developed some corroborated efforts to link the death data and the birth data with the national statistic classifications and concepts. So there has been a bit of work done there. But in terms of data quality and certifying that this administrative data is suitable for statistical purpose, it's a work in progress, I must say. And we are also just eager to learn from other countries on how successfully they have been able to implement that. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So maybe we'll go over, oh, sorry, Tuli, did you want to add anything to that answer? Apologies.
No.
No, okay. Omerbek, we'll go back to you. So you had a few questions about whether your framework covers data beyond government, what countries you think have good frameworks for using administrative data, what countries you learned from on e-governance and whether that allowed you to leapfrog, and maybe if you can reflect on the question about protecting privacy and other civil liberties.
Thank you. As for the first question, the law is about administrative data that come from the line ministries and agencies. In other words, it's only government data and that doesn't include private sector. So this is the answer to the first question. And the second question about the other country experiences on e-government. So as far as I remember, Kyrgyzstan has some good relations with Estonia, and in terms of data exchange, I think we are adapting the X-row technology that Estonia is using when it comes to data exchange between line ministries and agencies. And as for the statistical cooperation, the National Statistical Office has very long-lasting cooperation with Nordic countries, in particular with Statistics Norway, and we have been cooperating with Statistics Norway for over 10 years, and now we are talking about the next phase of our cooperation. And one of the areas for future, if we will have an extension for 3 more years, would be as Statistics Norway is planning to help the NSO to build a system for register-based population and housing census based on the administrative registers and based on the administrative IDs for persons and dwellings. As for the legal framework, the United Nations Statistics Division, when we were starting our project of modernization of the legal framework, the UNSD proposed, strongly recommended that we go for the generic law on official statistics, because this is a model law for the Central Asia, Caucasus, and Eastern Europe. And as far as I remember, the law of the Kyrgyz Republic on official statistics is considered to be one of the best among former Soviet Union countries in terms of being in line with the generic law on official statistics and the fundamental principles of official statistics. Thank you.
Thank you, Omerbek. That was very helpful. That was great. So maybe we'll just go back to Diego for a final comment from your side in response to any of the questions, and perhaps the question on protecting civil liberties in the use of administrative data. Please.
Hey everyone, I'm talking in the name of Diego. My name is David Sanchez. About the question about the framework that protects people's civil liberties from the misuse of the statistics based on or administrative data, we can say that in Ecuador, we have 2 laws. One law is the statistical law that protects all the data that the Institute of the Statistics create and publish. And also we have the data of what's the name of this? Personal information law, which protect also in a very hard way the development of the data, of the personal data. Also, in the Latin American structure, the CEPAL is working in a law, in a general law that protect the framework, or that create a framework to protect the data about all the National Institutes of Statistics.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So we are rapidly coming to the end of our time. I think this has been an incredibly rich discussion, I think as evidenced by the very deep and detailed questions. So many issues to consider with respect to data quality, with respect to governance and protections, with respect to cross-government collaboration and legal frameworks. But also, I think a lot of interest in leveraging administrative data and doing so much more readily and much more effectively to complement or compensate for some of the more traditional data collection methods. As you can see on the screen, we have the results of the Slido, seeing changes that people would like to see. We have standardization standing out quite strongly, as well as trust, integration, and transparency. So I think that speaks for itself. I was also struck earlier this morning, I joined a live session on Leave No One Behind and the role of data in reaching the most marginalized. And there was a repeated emphasis on the role of administrative data, as everyone has said today, to get greater granularity, better targeted responses and policies in response to COVID and well beyond in terms of socioeconomic development. So for our final few minutes, we're going to go back to Freddie Rodriguez from Cepei, who we unfortunately lost at the beginning of the call. And he will share a few thoughts of what he was going to share at the beginning of the call and just conclude. We apologize again for the technical difficulties getting started, but thank you so much for bearing with us and for joining us for this important event. Over to you, Freddie.
Thank you, Jenna. Yes, so could you let me just share a couple of slides. So as Jenna mentioned, we had discussed for several months and since last year about admin data, how we can contribute to countries. So the reason to host a peer-to-peer exchange last year in Mexico City, bringing 5 African countries and 6 Latin American and Caribbean countries to Mexico to discuss on new opportunities and new ways so that they can have a technical cooperation, South-South cooperation in a way that those lessons learned from countries, either from Africa or from Latin America, could be actually implemented in some other countries and in different regions as well. So in that example, what we did was also to bring actors from governments as well, besides the one from the NSOs. So we included ministries and agencies in order for them to share these experiences, not only talking about data, but also how is the modus operandi for them to collect this data on admin records that is actually requested by law in most of the cases in those countries. And we have identified, and this was the connection with the presentation of Viveki, that in most of the cases, they have commonalities in those countries on the challenges that they have. This is not new, but also those challenges were approaching by the countries in different ways. So some of them had positive results, others were actually still working on those. So the dissemination of those best practices, that's actually some of the points that we want to continue on, actually taking the opportunity to conclude this session, is how we can integrate those practices and know what countries are doing. I was actually looking at the chat, and many of the participants were mentioning, where is this best practice, where is the platform? They were asking Namibia. So all of those elements, if we are able to put this together in one single place, it will help the countries that actually are looking into possibilities to work on admin data. And also to the creation of public goods. So we know that it's quite difficult to have public goods, especially in some regions or countries where they have some barriers as well. But it's possible if we put together different countries and different perspectives as well to create a standardization. That was one of the words that was mentioned in the slide, how we can standardize the way that we approach admin data, or at least have some elements to be able to approach. And also to bear in mind that each topic might be different when we approach vital statistics, when we approach education, when we approach other topics on the social thematics that might be different to be discussed with ministries or other agencies within the government, and even besides the national statistical system. How these discussions can be broader to other communities. So the multi-stakeholder approach on bringing not only the NSOs, but also ministries, agencies, private sector, academia as well, on this discussion about data, even if they don't have the expertise about admin data, becomes relevant into the future discussion, and is actually part of what we want to do with the collaborative that Viveke presented. We can engage with agencies from the UN system, from other organizations as well, from civil society, to discuss about admin data. What are the demands? What are the limitations? But also what are the opportunities that we can have in those challenges that they have. So continuing those peer-to-peer exchanges or knowledge exchanges is something that we would like to continue to do with GPSDD as well in Africa, Latin America, and also in other regions as well. And now through the work of the collaborative, this becomes a possibility to have these peer-to-peer exchanges. Now we know that we have the virtual opportunity through this kind of platforms, but we want to approach more specific thematics as the ones presented in the collaborative. And finally, to conclude, is also to welcome all your comments as well, and the possibilities of some of the NSOs that are not part of the collaborative to eventually join some of the sessions and webinars that we will be having in order to learn from others as well. And also to bring some of the challenges and opportunities or best practices, lessons learned that you already have developed in your countries so that others can learn as well. So I think that's all from my side, just to express my gratitude for all of you to participate in this webinar. I think the survey already has been shared by Karen. So if you can please complete the survey as well, will be very helpful for us in order to have those inputs for future virtual events as well. Thank you everyone for joining the session, especially for the ones that are located in the part of the world where it's already night or evening. We much appreciate your time and thank you for all the information shared by the panelists. We appreciate that information as well.